Hi, my name is Steve Unwin. I'm the third Vice President of the AAS, and this brief presentation will help you to manage the session that you're chairing. And want to thank you very much on behalf of the Society for volunteering to chair a session. I'm sorry we can't do this in person. At our in-person meetings, we do a special breakfast for session chairs. But get a cup of coffee and a snack when we're done here. That's about the best I can offer for right now. Okay, so here are a few slides that will help you in chairing your session. So here's the big picture. You should reach out to every speaker in your session the day before, reminding them that they're presenting and asking to log on at least 15 minutes early to make sure that everything is running smoothly before the session starts. You and the speakers in your session will receive emails 1 week, 1 day, and 1 hour before your session, giving you access to the Zoom link for your session. So there's no uploading of slides. We do all of this through Zoom, and the speaker will present their own slides. There'll be a technical host available during the session via Slack to help with any technical problems. One of the key things is that as the session chair, you'll be responsible for keeping the session and each speaker on time. It's really important that you keep to the listed schedule. Questions will be done entirely through Slack, and as session chair, you're responsible for selecting those questions and actually reading them out loud for the speaker to answer. You and the speaker will have control over the microphone, but audience members will be muted throughout. So there's some things you must do to prepare for the session. Prior to the start of the meeting, make sure you check out the Training and Resources website. There's a lot of useful information there, and that you have stable internet. That's important for all virtual meetings. And try and find a comfortable and secure environment where you won't be interrupted during the session. Important to familiarize yourself with Zoom if you aren't already, knowing how you'll find your way around it. And Slack is going to be important for this meeting. Every session has its own Slack channel, and you should have received instructions by email for that. So make sure that you can get onto the AAS website, specifically the meeting website at that address, and read the abstracts of the talks in your session, because you'll want to prepare some questions in advance. And the speaker training webinars, which you may find useful the few days prior to the meeting. So everyone will log into the meeting through the AAS website. Here's the link that everyone who's a member will use. As a session chair, and this is really important, you will get a separate email Zoom link for your specific meeting. Okay, here's what the opening page for the meeting will look like. The auditorium is for the main large plenary talks, and you can find the schedule and itinerary on the link on the right. And most of this is fairly self-explanatory. Okay, responsibilities as a session chair. So you will get the list of speakers in your session. You should have already received that. To access your sessions, you want to go to your email and find the email that has this as the sending address, AAS meetings from a Zoom address. And you will get this reminder several times before your session so that you can find it easily. Important to check in early so that the session can start on time. That gives you 15 minutes to troubleshoot any last minute issues, and there is tech support available for you should you need that. Make sure you have the right time zone. The meeting times are all on Eastern time. Show up on time. Questions will come in through Slack, and before the meeting, the presenter will contact you if they have any issues. Introducing each speaker, of course, name, institution, talk title. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And the Q&A will be done entirely on Slack. So you should be prepared to ask questions and stimulate discussion following each talk. So accessing the sessions, I mentioned the email address that you need to go find. It's very important that you use this Zoom link and not through the main meeting agenda. That's because this gives you the privilege that you need to actually run the session. So what I recommend is that you add this invitation to your calendar when you receive the email. That way you'll be sure to click on the right link when the time comes. Facts about running the Zoom meeting. We'll have a tech co-host to help you. You'll be the other host and you'll have control over the meeting functions. We're going to record each session. The tech host will take care of that. And we should begin testing 15 minutes before the appointed hour for the session. If the speaker doesn't show up within 5 minutes of the session, it's time to contact the meeting staff to get help identifying where your speaker got to. You start by introducing the first speaker, name and institution. And if you have trouble navigating the sessions, at any time the tech host can step in. And there's also an email address for those folks that you can reach separately. For Zoom, you can operate either through the web browser or through the app, and make sure that each speaker knows that they can screen share through whichever version of Zoom that they're using. In PowerPoint and Keynote, there's a presenter mode that only works if you have a second screen. It may be better to turn that off, but make sure the presenter knows how to switch screens if they're planning to use that, so what goes out on Zoom is the right version, the full screen version. And when you do that, if you have any notes, they're typically not visible, so you might encourage the speaker to make sure that they have their notes handy to refer to some other way. For screen sharing, you will see a screen which allows you to control the screen sharing. So that's the way that the speaker brings up the presentation on their screen and shares it with the attendees. So once you click on the share screen, this window comes up and you select whether it's PowerPoint or the entire screen. Generally, PowerPoint works pretty well if you go to full screen mode. If you have embedded sound in your presentation, you have to enable the share computer sound in this window that shares, otherwise it will be silent. There's a timer at the top of the screen, which the presenter may find useful, but it's pretty small and most presenters don't pay attention to it. So one of the things you must do as session chair is to make sure you pay attention to the time. And there's a stop share button there to end the presentation. So after each talk and after you've done an introduction for each speaker, make sure you turn your video off and that you're also muted unless you're actually trying to speak. Every session at this meeting has a Slack channel, and they're organized by the number of the session that corresponds to the overall program. So these channels are important because that's where the Q&A will go, and you should be monitoring that while the talk is going on so that you're ready to handle questions as they enter into that Slack channel. So if you need more information on actually running Slack, there's a nice video that's posted on the AAS YouTube channel going through some of the mechanics of how Slack works. Opening the session. So the first thing to do is to introduce yourself, who you are and what you'll be doing for the session. Make sure that all the speakers have their notifications off on their devices so that they don't wind up broadcasting to everyone. If they're not currently presenting, speakers should remain on mute until it's their turn, and just request that people pay attention to the speaker. It's tempting to multitask, but really that's not the way to get the best out of the meeting. All attendees will be muted on entry to the session, and attendees actually stay muted the way the AAS is running these meetings. So you should welcome the attendees in your opening remarks and introduce the name and the number of the session very clearly so folks know that they're in the right place for whatever talks are coming up. It's really important to keep speakers on time. So use a separate timer or cell phone, however you want to mark the time, but you have to pay attention to that all the time. It's really important. So remind speakers and the audience about the rules of the session, time limits. We're going to keep strictly to the times in the program so that people can switch between sessions. We do expect a collegial and professional atmosphere throughout, and everyone who's involved with the meeting is subject to the AAS code, but as chair, you're expected to help enforce these standards should that be necessary. I encourage attendees to provide feedback and questions on each talk using the Slack channel set aside for your particular session. And as chair, you will read the questions from Slack out for the audience to hear and for the speaker to respond to. And it's your job to manage those questions in whichever order you feel. You have some freedom in managing that discussion. Very often these discussions will want to continue after the talk has officially ended. The Slack channel remains open, and so anyone who wants to continue conversing with the speaker through Slack can do that basically offline while the rest of the meeting continues. Time allocations. So the time allocated comprises presentation, question, and transitions. For the short contributed talks, they're 5-minute talks, 3 minutes for questions, and then 2 minutes for transition to the next talk. Dissertations are twice that length, which makes 15 minutes for presentation. Invited talks will have an introduction, a quick bio to the speaker, and then 40 minutes of presentation, and the rest of the time until time's up will be Q&A. Special sessions, those are actually managed by the organizers, and they vary quite a bit. And again, there's a lot of session information in the training resources on the website at the address that you see there. So managing time is really important always for meetings that have parallel sessions. So if there's a hole in the schedule, a speaker doesn't show up or a speaker ends early, you should plan to fill that time with discussion. And if the discussion really has finished, you can ask the tech host to display the standard AAS housekeeping set while the clock runs out and you move on to the next talk. So do not start talks early. It's not doing anyone a favor who's trying to join the session. And don't change the order of the talks either. So keeping the speaker on time is something that you just have to do. There's a clock at the top of the window the presenter sees, but no, they may not pay attention to it. So you should use a separate timer, and you do need to interrupt the speaker if it looks like they're going long. You have to use judgment there, allow enough time for questions. So for a contributed talk, within 1 minute of speaking, of an ending, you should give them a warning, 2 minutes for dissertation, and for the longer talks, tell the speaker they have 5 minutes left. So if the speaker won't stop, then you just have to interrupt them, and if all else fails, the tech host can actually cut off the speaker who really won't stop talking. Rarely happens. And you have to adjust the timing of the Q&A period to stay within the time allocated, so that if a speaker does run long, they have to take that time out of the Q&A. Resist the temptation to get ahead of schedule. Really do need to stick to the official meeting schedule. Okay, a couple of things on courtesies. I mentioned the code, and it is up to you as chair to enforce that if some of the questions are a little too probing or off color, you have to step in. And a simple courtesy for the speaker, if you're not sure about how to pronounce their name, make sure that you find out beforehand how they like to be addressed. So it's a good idea to connect with the speakers before the session, preferably email several days in advance, just in case they have any questions. when you introduce each speaker, be sure to cover their name, their affiliation, and the full title of their contribution. Questions, you can remind the speaker and the audience. The Slack channel is where you go for question and answers. And you are responsible for reading out the question during the Q&A session. At the end, obviously, courtesy is to thank the speaker before transitioning to the next presenter. And at the end of the session, just thank all of the speakers for participating and the audience for listening. A word on speaker encouragement. We have a lot of young researchers, grad students, postdocs. A lot of early career speakers are nervous, and of course, they're anxious to create a good impression. So be conscious of that when introducing the speakers. You may need to set them at their ease before you go live during the session. Make contacts, particularly the younger researchers really appreciate you reaching out to them. So if you run across them in Slack or in any other venue during the meeting, just say hi to them and thank them for presenting. And you might follow up with the speakers in your session, all of them, thanking them for participating. Now, and small things like this really can make a difference to young astronomers. A word on the AAS embargo policy. This is the same for the main meetings and for the divisions. The short version is that all findings, regardless of how you access them, are embargoed until the time they're presented. And time of presentation means the start of the session in which they're given, or the press conference if there is one. You can see the full version of the embargo policy at this link on the screen. The key point is that whether you're reporting, Twittering, or whatever app you're using, the science talks are fair game once the session starts. And that applies even if there's a scheduled press conference coming up later. Okay, well, so that's a brief summary of what it takes to chair a session. I want to thank you very much for volunteering to do this. And if you have any questions about chairing a session, you can contact the AAS staff or any of us vice presidents. And we're looking for ways to improve this presentation or the meeting format to make this clearer and to run the meetings as smoothly as we can. So thank you very much for your attention and hope you enjoy the meeting.